Brian Cadd, welcome to Australian Musician.
Thank you much, sir. Thank you very much.
You've recorded country and country rock songs in the past, but never a full country album. What was the inspiration for finally going down that path and giving us Dream Train?
Well, I think what really happened was that the record company said, let's do another album if you got any ideas. And I said, well, I'll just go and, take a metaphorical paper bag and put some songs in it and see which ones talk to each other and which ones talk to me and what direction we'll go in. And I did 2 weeks of that, and they included ideas for songs and little pieces of paper and little recordings. And finally, after a couple of weeks, I went through my bag, so to speak, and I found that not only did the ones that I'd found join each other well, they were all brothers and sisters in terms of their likeness, but they also were all country songs. So then something really exciting happened. I went to, I'd moved back from New York to the Gold Coast a couple of years ago, and I've discovered this great studio there. And it's run by a lunatic called Lindsay Waddington. I can't describe him really, but he's a great engineer and great player, actually. And he has a whole nest of country players that he uses because he records John Williamson and Troy and all kinds of country acts. So it was almost like the signs were pointing me, I found these songs that could very well be country, and then I found a way to record them. And we just went in with no expectation, just take us for a ride and see what happens. And this album is a result of that. After 2 weeks, we had most of the band tracks and a lot of the overdubs. It was so fast. It was wonderful.
So how far back do your country influences go? What were the country rock albums you enjoyed listening to back in the day?
Well, I was a convert of the band, the Bob Dylan backing band, and the music from Big Pig changed my life forever. It also changed Sharrock's life, which is why we formed Axiom. Even though we were Australians and therefore kind of a bit tied to England, it was very hard to go to America back in those days, in the mid-60s, late 60s. But it was very easy to go to England. And all of the people that we really loved were people like the Flying Burrito Brothers and the Byrds, and, all of those beautiful, beautiful bands. But most of all, we loved what the band did. And that changed me forever as a writer, as a performer. Unfortunately, we went to England. There was no country rock at all. But anyway, that's another whole story. So I suppose that's really the biggest influence on me. Although I have to say that when I was about 8, I went to I lived in Perth, and 6IX in Perth had this radio program on Sunday mornings for a couple of hours, like 10 to 12 or something. And they played country music, really. They run all the Hanks and all the Slims and everyone you could imagine. And it was the real deal. And this is when I was 8, so that's a long, long time ago. No one of my generation at 8 would have probably listened to country music unless they lived in, Gundagai or Yass or somewhere, or Kentucky. But that influenced me a lot. And I suppose I spent a year or so listening to that program every week. But I went on to become in the rock field, if you like. So I never ever got to think about it as something that I would do as an artist. Although I lived in Nashville and I had studios there and, all that sort of stuff. So I've skated around all of it for years and years and years until now. And then just all of a sudden all the signs led to Tamworth, and off I went.
Yeah. So Dream Train was all recorded in Australia because it sounds like it could easily have come out of Nashville.
Yeah. Oh, these players are very close. And I think we're getting that way anyways. For a long time, we punched above our weight. And I think, a lot of the players and studios here are much better than we think they are, compared to the world. But no, it was all recorded on the Gold Coast with fair dinkum Aussies. It's great.
Yeah. I was at your album launch last weekend, and your band was superb. Shane Riley on pedal steel and Claire O'Mara on fiddle and accordion.
Yes,
Those elements play a big part in Dream Train. Did Shane and Claire both play on the album?
Claire did. Claire played fiddle and squeeze box on them. Shane didn't, because up there we have Michelle Rhodes, and who's just like, he's as good as anything in Nashville. He's wonderful, and he's local up there. So rather than keep flying Shane up every 5 minutes, we use Michelle, and in fact the whole band that they're part of, with Doug Gallagher and Brendan Radford, people like that, and Gus Fenwick on bass, who was the original bass player for the Bootleg Family back at the beginning of the 70s. So for that, it completed a full circle.
Did you record any of the songs as a band, or were the parts done separately?
Yeah. No, that was mostly done as a band. About 4 years ago, I did an Americana album in Nashville, and they're very much that, where you put it on the floor and you go for all at once, because that's really the essence of country music. It's not a take 3 years and overdub everything a take at a time. They like to hear everything around them, and they're very gently, very well mannered, in the sense that while someone else is soloing, they're very quiet or don't play or whatever. They're very cognizant of all the other parts, unlike the typical rock and roll model, which is to count it in, I'll see you at the end. It's not like that so much now, but it always was. Anyway, this is exactly what happened. We went in and we had steel guitar, bass, and drums on the initial recordings, which yielded so much stuff that's finished up on the album. And then we had a few months or so of overdubbing, and that was really more just listening for the right parts rather than the right players, because we had Laurie Minson on everything, and Pete Robinson on guitar, and some other, and Bodo himself is a rather amazing guitar player, and he plays banjo and everything. It's got strings on it. So we had a wealth of things to go shopping with, if you like. And we had some great singers. In particular, we had a gal called Jen Mize, who was originally from America. Do you know Jen, or you know of her?
I know of her. I've never met her, but yeah.
Yeah, she's wonderful. She does everything from sweet, beautiful country harmonies all the way through to Tina Turner. She's just an incredible talent. She got a new album out at the moment, so if you get a chance to listen to it, you should. It's really, really good. And she came down from the Sunshine Coast for a few days, and we just sat around and talked about parts and went in and filled with them, and because she can sing anything. So it's not a question of what's in her range. It was just a question of what we could dream up. And that was true for most everybody. But we did it in 2 stages, if you like. We did it with the band tracks, which incorporated solos and everything. And then we just overdubbed the touches. And the fiddle, Claire came up for a few days. We fiddled away and squeeze boxed away. And it was fantastic.
Yeah. So what was the piano you recorded with in the studio, and how fussy are you about the piano you use when you're recording?
Well, this was a Roland, and a Roland electric grands are as good as, I can't tell the difference. I don't imagine anyone, who's not a piano player would ever be able to pick it. And I don't play exhaustive parts. I don't tend to do the piano anymore on the band track. I tend to make it as one of the last things we put down, unless it's a figure that's needed. And the reason that happened was when I went to Nashville to do the Americana album, Mark Moffat, who's an Australian producer, was there, and he did the album with me. And on the first day I got to the studio, and he said to me, "Now, you've been bullying people with your piano for 55 years, so you're not getting one. You just have to go in there with your words and sing best as you can. You're now the lead singer of a band." And that hadn't happened to me since the 60s. And it was such a freedom to not have to kind of keep, ducking and weaving with the hands and the vocal. And I could just concentrate on that. And so this time we did exactly the same thing. So by and large, the boys put all the stuff on the band tracks and I just sang rough vocals.
Yeah. 10 tracks on the album. Were there others that you were tinkering with that didn't make the cut?
No, we always had 10. I know usually you do. You go and I had a couple of other ideas. I thought if anything falls over, I can, bump them in. But at the end of the day, it was always those 10. And it's a bit like they knew they were related and I didn't necessarily. And they just wanted to be together. I mean, that's silly, but it sort of felt like that a bit, because I'd put another song up and say, well, what have you said of it? And it just wouldn't fit. Maybe I was wanting it not to fit, but it was an incredible experience.
Yeah. Is there a track on Dream Train which is closer to your heart than others?
Oh, no, they're all my babies, all the songs are. You love them for different reasons. But I suppose if I had one favourite, it might be the one that got away. And that's because it's come out as a kind of a young sibling to Let Go. It's the same kind of feeling, even though not the same sentiments, feels the same to sing, feels the same to play. It's just one of those, and it's a pure country song. It's not rock and rollers trying to be a bit country. It's a complete country song, as was Let Go. So I do have a rather special place for that one. But I could tell you all, any one of them I can tell you I like for a different reason. Yeah. There's not any bad ones on there for me. It's great.
The cover art is quite stunning. Where did that come from?
Comes from a very young Melbourne photographer, a young lady who did the centerfold, the black and white picture. And then she just sent that to me. And she said, I've just had, I know that the album's now going to be called Dream Train because we weren't sure at first. And I just had a bit of a fiddle, whatever that meant. And I thought you might like something like this. And it came down exactly like that. We didn't change anything about it. It's just stunning, isn't it? At my age, it's better if I don't put my picture on my front. It's better. but I just wanted something spectacular that would stand out, as opposed to, yet another guy with yet another piano. And it's really worked perfectly. I did an install last night in Brisbane, and it was out in the racks with all the other albums, and it just rang out. It was so different looking. So I think it serves that purpose as well, to say it's a bit like I've arrived, here I am. Yeah. I love it.
Was it a difficult album to let go and say it's finished?
Yeah, well, not really. I mean, no. If I have to be honest, no, it wasn't. We really knew when we were pretty much there. If you met Watto, that's a hard question to answer because Watto's version of life is, if I've got a bazooka in the room, I'll try and find a part for it. But so I spent half the time throwing buckets of water over him so he didn't bazookas on, and the rest of the time being absolutely astounded by what he could do with a ukulele or whatever. But eventually it got to the point where we just looked at each other and we said, okay, time to mix. We got it. Here it is. And we mixed it because we'd been kind of mixing them as we went along. Which is one of the great things about having the engineer be the co-producer and also owning the studio, is that he could go in and, do those tedious things that they do to make everything sound good. You don't want to sit there for 2 hours listening to the hi-hats. And he would do a lot of that stuff. And so as we went along, the tracks were getting mixed, sort of, partially mixed. So much so that when we actually sat down and said, okay, what have we got to do with this one? And we'd say, we need to balance those three things and that there. And that. So, but the list of things wasn't very long because they were already partially mixed. That was a good thing. Because one of the things that always seems so impossible to me was that after you finished all that recording, after all that period of time, then you had to sit really quiet in the studio and mix it all together so it made sense to everybody else. But we got there on the way, which was lovely.
Yeah. In my review of your album launch for Dream Train, I suggested that we don't acknowledge our heritage music acts in the same way that the Americans do. Do you feel that yourself?
In what? How? Give me an example. Like,
they seem to, I don't know, put them up on a pedestal. What, you know, anyone with a great catalogue of music and a great history, they seem to be more revered.
Yes, I think that goes back also to a greater reverence of the music itself. And I think some of that's to do with the way their music has always spoken of them. You know, they don't write music about Yugoslavian, you know, warships. They're going to write about a still in Kentucky, or, you know, they're terribly, because they are very proud of being Americans, and they're very proud of their, and rightly so, very proud of their musical history and heritage. I think they tend to stay within those boundaries, and therefore it feels like those you know, that music has got enormous support from the industry and enormous support from the audiences. Although I would be prepared to say now, not so much from the industry point of view, but Australian audiences, we've got them pretty trained now. They're pretty good. You know, they have a great ability to be enthusiastic, and they're looking for new things now. Not so much before, but now I think we've turned a corner there in a way. I don't know whether the industry, you know, broadcasting, etc., are following the trend, but I do know that in terms of audiences, they're really good at the moment. We're having a lot of fun.
Yeah. You're one of many artists that have donated a recording to ARCA, the Australian Road Crew Association. You donated the Sundowner gig at Geelong that you did back in the day. I guess shows wouldn't have happened without hardworking crews over the years.
No, we owe so much to them. And it's never been that we didn't know that. We've always known that, because in our world, when we started in the 60s, there weren't crew. There was a crew. There was and the guy did everything. He carried all the gear in. You know, if he had to hit a few sharpies, he did that on the way in. He, you know, tried to find a car place. And then he mixed the show. And then he went out and put everything back in the van and drove to the next gig, probably. So they were supermen, those people. And in a lot of ways, I think ARCA really worries about those, you know, the older ones that have put in so much time. You know, and some of them don't travel very well, and some of them, a lot of them psychologically don't do so good, because that's their whole life. They only knew about it. You know, taking it out of the van, putting it in the thing, doing the show, getting the musicians off the dance floor and back into the van and off there. That was, such an, you know, all-encompassing thing. And I think when suddenly they found themselves 50 years old and everyone was employing 21-year-olds, it was a hard one to reconcile, I suppose. But anyway, I was very happy to do it. Now, here's what I was most happy about. I didn't remember, that was in the 80s. And I don't know how many locals recorded disc tapes back in those days. I certainly didn't know about it. And so whoever the engineer was back then volunteered that, and then ARCA talked to me, and we you know, did it all and got it all organised. But that was just sitting there. I wonder how many of them are really just sitting there.
Yeah. They seem to be siphoning through occasionally. And
yeah, it's a good
thing. Yeah. So you've done the country album, you've done Dream Train. Any other bucket list projects still in the back of your mind?
Oh, just the polka album. I'll be doing the polka album. No, listen, I can't ask for any more change out of the dollar. It's such a great time, and done most of the things that I wanted to. I've just written a musical with one of the guys from 10cc, and that's the last thing that I can say that I haven't done. I've never had a musical on stage, but I'm getting close. We've got people interested in it. So I think if I was to get that happening, then I couldn't think of anything else I would.
Yeah. Is that Graham Gouldman you did that with?
No, Rick Fenn, the guitar player.
Okay. All right.
And so, you know, but that's it. I really can't complain. I've done all the things I wanted to do. And I don't have the desire to be overseas anymore. You know, I've got a lot of kids and grandkids here, and a lot of friends over the years, and some of those ranks are thinning a bit. So, you know, I want to be here now and enjoying all of this stuff. It's great fun.
Yeah. So the album's out. What's on for the rest of the year?
Well, you can't really give your agency a new album and then not expect them to go out and book you everywhere there's electricity. You know, that's what they do. And so it's already starting to, heap up in the second half of the year. And I think that'll probably culminate in next year's Tamworth. That would be a great place to land at the end of it all.
Yeah.
But in terms of individual gigs, they're still shaping a lot of that stuff up. But I know we'll go everywhere. There's not a state we won't do, or a region, I wouldn't imagine. And it's great fun to do it. And I'm hoping that I'll keep this band because, as you said, they're pretty exciting on stage, and they can play all the stuff on the album and a lot more. So I can't expect anything more from a band, can I really?
Yeah. Well, Brian Cadd, it's been great to catch up. Dream Train is out now. It's a fabulous album. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me, and thanks for the review the other day too. That was lovely. It really made our day the next day when we read it. That's a bit of icing on the cake after, because it's a bit nerve-wracking doing things that involve a lot of industry people as well. I'm very happy, and we're very happy that you like it, and thanks for having me.
Catch you next time.